I'm about to tell you the story of the Great Scarlet Woman. If you stay tuned through the whole story, in the end, I'm going to share with you what this represents in real life. This period was a time of great loneliness for the women, who searched in vain for the deep, connective bond they had once shared intimately and sexually with their partners. But no matter how hard they searched, the women could not find any men who were not gripped by the deep, hypnotic, and addictive spell of the Great Scarlet. The woman who had walked into the village that fateful day had destroyed the very foundation and ripped apart the very fabric of the individuals, relationships, and cultural traditions within an entire powerful ancient culture through sexual conquest and primal lust alone. Even the leaders of the village were mercilessly swept away by the Great Scarlet, leaving behind a village lacking the leadership, guidance, and power needed to address the grave threat. The most dangerous war had arrived on the banks of the village, claiming the heart and soul of its people. Yet there was nobody there to protect the men, the women, and an entire generation of youth from such devastation. Even the long-held traditional rite of passage ceremonies were abandoned under the fatigue and haze which had overtaken the elders and leaders of parental society, whose words were supposed to be trusted, whose guiding hand was supposed to protect the people. The men had utterly lost their way. They were unmoored, rudderless, and easily swept away by the powerful force of the two mighty rivers which passed through the village. The banks of the two verdant and mighty rivers, once the symbol of evolution and abundance, lay strewn with immobilized, impotent, and hollowed out men. The men idly stood by as the waters eroded their true nature, relationships, civilization, and souls. The men blankly stared at the waters of their lives passing by like the demolished debris of forest branches and trunks being whisked away by the currents of time. With such an abundance of pure, life-giving water right in front of them, the men could not quench their insatiable thirst for the Great Scarlet. It seemed there was no way to resist any more against the powerful and insurmountable force of the Great Scarlet's current, drowning the men and women of the village. The women could clearly see what was happening to the men, but the men were blinded by their obsession and addiction to the Great Scarlet. The women saw disempowered, impotent shells and zombie-like corpses of the men they once loved so immensely and deeply. But now the women were repelled by them. The men were under the spell of Scarlet, living a grandiose fantasy of themselves with Scarlet. The men believed they were getting all their needs met, that they were immensely satisfied, happy, successful, and empowered, when in reality, they were completely unsatisfied, depressed, fatigued, exhausted, disempowered, and utterly failing themselves, their relationships, and their community. Such was the hidden nature of the powerful neurotoxic and hypnotic sway Scarlet held over the men. The men lost their ability to see themselves realistically, instead choosing to believe in the delusion that they had created, which they perpetually and ceaselessly continued to chase. After suffering decades in the deepest and darkest period of delusion and sorrow, a small group of men began to stir and awaken deep within their consciousness and soul. They had crashed and smashed into tatters against the merciless rocks at the bottom of the rivers after losing their beloved partners, families, success, true happiness, and satisfaction. While they were utterly lost with no idea how to find their way out, they intuitively and instinctively fell back upon the ancient practice of the village of praying to God for guidance, protection, and inspiration. One by one, this small group of men fell to their knees, shedding tears of devastation and grief over the enormous losses they had experienced. They had lost their inherent confidence, identity, sexual energy, and performance, their wives and family, and ultimately, their true meaning in life. Over and over, these courageous men prayed with every fiber of their being for God to lead them out of the enormous suffering, misery, and nightmare they were experiencing. Though they could not see the way forward at that time and had no plan what to do, these men searched ardently and listened earnestly for God to save them. Because they had let go completely with absolute faith and shed all remnants of their ego, God heard their prayers. God embedded deeply within these men guidance, courage, power, inspiration, determination, and discipline to climb out of the deep valley they had fallen into and back to the ultimate beings God always meant for them to become. This small group of men were shown the simple truth that the source of all their misery and problems was from the unhealthy sexual behaviors they were practicing in their worship of the Great Scarlet. They were promised that all of their inherent powers for sexual, neurological, physical, relational, mental, emotional, and spiritual health and vibrancy would be fully restored once they simply stopped releasing their semen to the Great Scarlet and practiced the healthy tantrika bonding behaviors and semen retention with their real partner. As each of the men experienced increasing levels of power, energy, drive, motivation, inspiration, satisfaction, and joy, they began to see this in each other as they were walking through the village and working. They would stop each other and talk for long periods of time about what they were experiencing and what they had gone through with their addiction to the Great Scarlet. They were shocked to find out that each one of them was secretly worshiping Scarlet in hiding and losing everything because of it. They decided to start a group to show the other men the way out of their own suffering. At this time, the majority of the 15,000 men in the village were deep in the grips of their addictive behaviors and their insatiable quest to have sex with the Great Scarlet. The enormous power emanating from this small and courageous group of men began to create something truly beautiful, magnetic, and magical. As more and more men clearly saw the massive positive transformation that this group had experienced, the group numbers began to swell. This powerful group of men who had reclaimed all their inherent powers and birthright, who were in full alignment with the healing light and love of God, became the new leaders in the village over time. 5 years after this small group of men on the brink of extinction had fallen on their knees in desperate hope to reclaim their lives, there emerged one of them who became chief of the entire village. This bold and courageous man went about restoring the traditional ceremonies of teaching the youth about tantrika and healthy sexual behaviors once again. This fierce warrior chief banished the Great Scarlet from the village permanently, never to return. Before she left the village, the Great Scarlet tried everything in her power to deceive and trick the chief and his burgeoning group of empowered leaders from permanently exiling her. But her persuasive sex appeal no longer held any sway or power over them, because these men saw the Great Scarlet for exactly what she represented and brought to their people: utter dysfunction, devastation, and poisoned honey. The powerful yet humble chief knew from his own experience and the experience of his brothers that the Great Scarlet only brought grief, depression, and disempowerment onto himself and his brothers and sisters in the village. He knew this was the best decision he could ever make for the future of his village and their ancient traditions. He knew the Great Scarlet would leave nothing but utter wreckage, devastation, and destruction in her wake. Fields of immobilized and disembodied men of all ages, and mere hollowed out shells of the powerful beings they were truly meant to embody in life. Through the grace, guidance, and courage of God, this powerful chief decided to fight for his life, the life of all his brothers and sisters, and for the life of his village. He fought for everything essential and crucial to their empowerment, joy, and success as a people. The greatest of all temptresses was stripped of all her powers with the powerful decision of the leaders, and left the village just as she had wandered in decades earlier, as a mere phantom, a hungry ghost, and an empty vessel, lacking any true substance, sustenance, nourishment, empowerment, and meaning for the people. The people realized they did not need the false promises of the Great Scarlet. They were already perfect and had everything they needed for vital and vibrant health, balance, healing, light, and love. As time passed, the elders told the youth the story of the mesmerizing and fatal poison of the Great Scarlet. They warned the youth through ceremony and storytelling that the Great Scarlet appeared on the surface to fulfill everything the men of the village were seeking, but ultimately robbed them of everything crucial to their development, evolution, and empowerment. They warned the youth that the intoxicating scent and highly addictive lure of the Great Scarlet harnessed enough destructive power to create massive dysfunction on every level of the youth's lives. They warned the youth that falling into the manipulative trap and fatal snare of the Great Scarlet would strip them of their sexual and physical power, prowess, and stature, utterly dismantle and destroy their relationships and marriages, and contemptuously discard their essential true nature with complete disregard. They taught the youth the spiritual wisdom handed down to them by God. They deeply instilled in the youth the wisdom that the Great Scarlet was really an outer reflection of their own inner cosmology, a barometer of their state of growth, health, and empowerment. This is what they said to the youth, quote, "No man can hide from his fears. Since they are a part of him, they always know where to find him. You can never run, cower, and hide from the overwhelming powers of the Great Scarlet. You must harness your power from within, turn around, and stare directly into the eyes of the Great Scarlet with courage, strength, and power. Then you will see her for who she truly is, an empty quest for true satisfaction, joy, and empowerment, and a mirage in an empty, barren desert which can never bring true sustenance and never quench your thirst. True satisfaction, true joy, and true empowerment can only come from the thirst-quenching, nourishing, and life-giving pure waters of the two mighty rivers which flow through our village. True empowerment arises from deep within your own powerful mind and energy source within you. True empowerment harnesses, honors, and respects these inherent powers and gifts from God. True empowerment comes from consciously practicing healthy sexual behaviors which are in harmony and alignment with God and the laws of the universe." End quote. Because the great chief and his small band of brothers set about creating profound change within themselves and removing the very source of dysfunction which had plagued the village over the last decades by permanently banning the Great Scarlet, eventually all of the men and women in the village regained their full powers once again. One by one, each man in the village was healed once they made the decision to finally and permanently stop their worship of the Great Scarlet and practice the healthy bonding behaviors of their traditional tantrika. Once they removed the barriers they had erected around themselves, which were blocking their power from emanating from deep within, the healing light of God was finally able to return and penetrate deep into their body, mind, heart, and soul. The men could see, feel, and live freely once again as each sacred soul broke the heavy armor and shackles they were imprisoned in and were reborn into the beings they were truly meant to be in life. The village reclaimed its past glory and reached new pinnacles of evolutionary heights, progress, and success. The leaders made it law to forever teach the story of the Great Scarlet to the youth, to instill deep inside of them how great the risk and how much can be lost when they worship the Great Scarlet. This harbored in what came to be known as the Great Period of Joy, Empowerment, and Success, where the leaders looked out for their youth and protected them from the enormous suffering they had experienced, as true leaders are meant to do. So I guess you figured out what the Scarlet represents in real life. It represents pornography addiction, or any addiction in people's lives that's affecting negatively all of us, my brothers and sisters. And I have personally gone through this porn addiction myself and come out as one of the band of brothers in this group that is trying to reclaim our power. And I hope that this gives you an idea of how we can do this in real life, how we can reclaim our power. I'm a writer, and I wrote this short story to represent what is happening to us right now in reality. So while it's not directly a true story, I do believe this is absolutely very true and happening right now. And we really do need to address this monster of pornography that is coming and bearing down upon us. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to catch the next video.